co-party.
Biggest function they have, is to make sure that none of those subcommittees dies.
Exactly. Sister, why don't you?
Yes. I support. Yes.
True. No, that is true. But then, you know, it's even if again, please, let's just the whole idea is so yes, unfortunately. I'm wrong. Okay? So once you have that paper, just turn it over. Electricity and energy. I'm sure everybody wants to like this. Anybody for electricity and energy?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Mrs. Desani? Alright. Can we please pass electricity and energy paper to her? Anybody else in there? Fantastic, please. Next, oil and gas. Okay? Oil and gas. Please note that you can be in more than one if you want to. So can we pass oil and gas paper there? Electoral reform and judiciary. Electoral reform and judiciary. Fantastic. Please can we just pair? Alright. Transportation. Okay. So I know that. Okay. Alright. Education and health. Sorry, Mr. Jacob. Sorry. Forgive me. Okay.
Yes.
Can we split it? There's no yes, of course. I think we should actually. I think we should. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can we say education?
Yes.
Ross, have another one. Yeah. All right. Education.
Yes.
All right. Now, is that okay? Education. Please look around for any, once you're interested in any. Now can we, please, thank you. What about health? Anybody for health? Okay. This is where you find media and several others. Okay? Orchestration, I thought you were not. Yes, you were there. Don't you have a paper?
I think they will be there as well.
Were you education? I were you in both classes? Okay, yeah. Orchestration and advocacy. Alright. Just a quick check. Is there anyone who has not found a platform to express your background? Okay, now media and communication, we are not saying as one that you left outside is the one that you would like to be reached on.
They should just rewrite it.
Okay. Alright. Okay, so if you can just rewrite it, if you be too much of the way, we're able to do just enter it. And please let's make sure that whoever it is that is that chairperson willingly accepts it, not just that it's thrust upon them as a thing that can come out of this committee right now. Just one thing that is actionable towards what next to do and the next time we meet. Then that would be wonderful. Is there any other thing?
Whatever all the others want to communicate, defender of first days, I like to be back. I also know that this is supposed to be in check on people in government. Now that's my own passion. Both in governance or running down any public so I don't know the electoral or
For now, we can be like this. But it can't be together.
Decision.
So we're trying to solve the medical, we're trying to make an public health sector. Before you can make an impact, you must know what the
know the challenges.
Yes.
And to be able to know the way how
I'm sorry, I've looked. Can we let me I'm here
agreement within the next 4 to 6 weeks. But it is expected that there's a likelihood that we'll be able to, the teams will meet before then, either online, either in whatever way, but the teams will meet before then. So that by the next meeting, the teams can come up with a concrete, pronouncement of something that they want to do. So first of all, the next dates will be communicated, but it's definitely going to be between 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the only thing that we would like to do within your teams, if you can suggest the best day of the week that you suggest that we meet again, the best day of the week. If it's going to be between 4 to 6 weeks, the best day of the week within your teams, right? Because if you try to do it on the larger scale, it will just break down. So please, if you can suggest, just kind of like, pick the best day. Now, the next thing is that just before we leave, we actually do have the privilege of having Professor Tomi here for a few minutes on essentially what will help us sustain our passion and our growth in our individual groups, as well as whatever it is that he will be willing to share. So, sir, please don't be limited to that mandate alone. But the reason why we're asking Professor Tomi to speak to us is that he has been on several platforms, and like he himself admitted, some have worked, some have not worked, So really, he has a lot of benefit of hindsight as to what it is that we could do right and not also do wrong. So in the next 5 minutes, we will have Professor Tomi come in, and his call will be a call to the end of our deliberations for now. All right? In our groups.
This morning, as you engage with this very important assignment, recognize that we have key into specific line is still about nation building. The challenge before all of us is the challenge of something very fundamental, very basic, which is, I guess, what every human being should ask themselves, why am I here? The unexamined life is not worth living. We want to get Socratian this morning. And so from time to time we need to examine our lives and ask ourselves why we are here. The basis for action for me is a fairly simple one. if God did not intend for man to live in community, He would not have put us in, He would have created us as gregarious beings. We would have been all scattered. And since we were created as community humans, surely the whole idea of citizenship is and talents that are given to make a society produce a higher quality of life for all. Unfortunately, this has not always been properly harnessed, and the critical missing link is accountability, vertical accountability. The most available accountability is horizontal. It's very easy to set up an institution, an agency, EFCC, ICPC, or that. But it is people who are represented or for whom the service is being given, who, when they hold those giving them that service accountable, ensure effectiveness. Most of my academic work has been in the area of institutions and economic performance. And I very often like to make the point of the fact that no group of human beings, by the nature of their birth or where they are located, are better, more accountable than any other group of human beings. People are accountable based on the nature of institutions around them. And this is why a typical situation of a Nigerian getting on an aircraft in Murtala Mohammed Airport and 6 hours later behaves completely differently than he behaved when he was boarding that aeroplane in Lagos. Completely different. Because there is a consequence for behaving in a particular manner on the other side. Same fellow gets back on that aircraft, lands in Lagos, and behaves again. And even more interesting, bring those people who live in the UK, who live in the US, who are not Nigerians, those Americans, those British citizens who are behaving so properly. Bring them to Nigeria, after a couple of weeks, they will do all those things that we do. Because institutions set the boundaries to human conduct. And after a while, those boundaries, we respond to those boundaries in such a way that they become what I hate to be the academic that I am. A guy called Ronald Coase defined in 1937 as settled habits of a community. So the guy then looks like he's basically okay because he's American. No, he's not okay because he's American. It's because the boundaries have led him to behaving in that okay manner for long enough that the community accepts the settled habits. So habitually he conducts himself that way. But he goes to a place where those boundaries don't exist after a while. They do indeed begin to behave differently. Now the question is, how do these boundaries emerge? I think one of the most interesting discussions of this subject, of how institutions evolve, is a 1990 book by a fellow who went on to win the Nobel Prize in Economics called Douglas North. And the book is titled Institutions, Institutional Change and Economic Performance. And in effect, what North argues is that institutions evolve out of the action of citizens, civil society engaging in the public space. And after a while, people trying to get advantage for themselves, it becomes obvious to them that it's best to have something like a level playing field, a particular way of behaving. So if we're going to build institutions that will make our environment reduce uncertainty, which we can all expect to thrive, then we do have a duty to engage in trying to make people accountable to us. Most of my adult life, I have been engaged in that regard. And as I said, some have failed, some have worked. Many years ago, we started the concerned professionals. I'm sure many of us still remember. There was this same frustration about how things were running in our country. And I recall that I wrote an article out of frustration with the way things were going following the annulment of the elections of 1993. A couple of people responded and decided to write another one, which 3 of us now signed, and out of it came the concerned professionals. Now, part of what we tried to do in the concerned professionals, obviously, the issue of the moment was the annulment of that election. We tried to engage public space in more reasoned discussion of the issues here. It did have its influence, it did affect a few things. But it is about some of the things that we did later that I wanted to share about how, getting people who are keyed into something that is of direct interest and of immediate consequence for their environment can make some difference. Now, back in the late 90s, some of us may recall the roads in Lagos were just a disaster. They were motoring. It's hard because of the way things are looking now for people to recall those times. So they were really, really, really bad. And you inquire about what's going on, people say, oh, it's local governments who received all this money, they've not done anything. So as concerned professionals, we said that we were going to have workshops and bring local government chairmen and hold them to account for what was going on around. And we had a couple of these workshops at NIIA. And we invited the then chairperson of the Etiosa local government, who was back then. This gentleman was a retired army officer. People were of the opinion, oh, these guys are so insensitive, they're so brash, they're so power drunk, they wouldn't even respond. Why don't we just go ahead? This is important in all this. In the end, we invited this fellow, and I have never seen an army officer shake like, it was like jelly. He was really petrified that, I was trying to explain the problems. But you see, we had taken it for granted that he wouldn't give a damn, he wouldn't even come, but it came out very clearly that the reason that they were accounting to no one is that nobody called them to account. It's the simple truth of the matter. And he promised a few things that day, blamed someone, these are federal roads, these are states, these are that and that. But it shook Etiosa into some response. And so it seems to me that one of the key things that we need to focus on, I keep talking about the budget process. I talk about citizen monitoring. Budgets are just announced and everybody hears these numbers. In fact, I'm ashamed every other Wednesday when the Federal Executive Council meets. Because it looks like we've reduced the Federal Executive Council of Nigeria to a contract awarding body. The day after the meeting, they will tell you we awarded this contract, awarded that contract. It's not what Federal Executive Council is supposed to be doing, awarding contracts. But anyway, the point is, they announced these contracts that they've awarded, and none of us ever asks, okay, so you awarded $1 billion for X. What happened to it? I think that it's important, whatever areas we take on, that we be able to develop some data bank on that particular area. I mean, the area people talk about the most, roads. Let's take roads for example. You create a committee, say in the budget, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, forget about the concession and all that. Assuming there's X budgeted for Lagos-Ibadan Expressway maintenance. And we create a committee of people who regularly use the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. maybe some bus driver who applies it on a daily basis, maybe some engineers who will know a thing or two about road construction, maybe people, stakeholders. And this stakeholder monitoring group builds up comparative data of what it takes to maintain a similar kind of road in Kenya, in Ghana, in wherever else in the world, and insists that at the beginning of the budget year there should be a town hall meeting where the agency of government responsible for that road explains to the people. They will not refuse. They will do all kinds of things to push it away, delay things, but they will never refuse because they have an obligation to do it. But you see, we easily run out of patience. So when we run out of patience, they move on. They know that they've managed to get rid of these ones. But when we persevere in trying to bring them to some structured way of discussing the issues, we will find that we will get more of the resources spent, and you can compare. I tell you, one of those heartbreaking stories that a classmate of mine from Loyola College in Ibadan went to school in Germany because his name is English sounding. I can mention his name, I'm Shin. No, his brother, Frank, and joined Siemens in Germany and was posted to South Africa. And somehow he was posted from South Africa to Nigeria without people or the officials becoming sensitive to the fact that it was Nigeria because his name is English sounding, Frank Shin. When he came to Nigeria, shortly after he returned to Nigeria, I was on the flight to Abuja with him. And he was in a state of despair. He said to me, I can't understand it. My people charge this country 4 times as much for any basic service as they charge Kenyans, who are very corrupt people also. 4 times as much for Copwell, telecom. Now, if that kind of basic information were available to people who pick up, say, telecoms as their area, and they were at a quarterly town hall meeting with officials responsible, and you bring what it costs in Kenya, you bring what it costs elsewhere in the world, and ask them, why is there this difference? If they don't have an answer, and they won't have an answer, they'll have to change behavior. That must be the kind of, it will take doing work, but we have to be passionate. We've got to be an area we really have a keen interest in. A couple of years ago, motivated primarily by a South African businessman, he's actually English, but had built up a business in Zimbabwe. The founder of Promasidor, the company Promasidor. We created a continent-wide organization called Good Governance Africa. And I was nominated or elected president of Good Governance Africa. The idea of Good Governance Africa was to be able, and we were working with a group of people at Harvard, at University of Bordeaux in France, and some university in the UK. The idea was to take on to develop a a review mechanism that could fit in, and we take every area of service roads. We develop sophisticated potholes index to measure how many potholes are on roads. You develop a classroom index. You develop a certain health index and all of that. And the problem with that initiative was that to pull it off, after all the work we've done, from this man's pockets, we have spent a couple of $1 million just getting things organized. The idea was that we're going to be able to get corporations from around the world that have shown strong social responsibility to put money into this budget to get good governance. Robert Bates at Harvard was leading the team developing the various indicators. And the cost of just running that was just so much. Our budget was something like $30–40 million a year. And in the end, we couldn't raise enough money to run that. But it is possible that if we took on some of these areas and we developed indicators that are very objective, and we have these kinds of town hall meetings, and we created cells of interested people. And going back to our friend Douglas North and his book on institutions and economic performance, the point he makes is that the final analysis is about self-interest, discovering that self-interest is best advanced when the playing field is there. In final analysis, you realize that unless you create, you come to it, look, personal advantage today, you know, I'm in power, I have, so I profit, my friends profit, but tomorrow I'm out, I lose, my friends lose, somebody else is profiting. The next day somebody is struggling to get power. In the end, everybody realizes the best thing is this level playing field for all. And everybody profits. Let me just close by making the point that our circumstance, the Nigerian condition is really more tragic than many of us realize. We talk about the situation that we have right now and the ideas of whether we are a failed or failing state. You all recall that a few years ago, global trends in the United States suggested that within 15 years, Nigeria would be a failed state. This was 7 years ago. These studies are carried out every 5 years. Last one was published last year. After this set of studies were done, the US intelligence community invited leaders of think tanks from around the world to meet in Stockholm, in Sweden, to review the work. I had the good fortune of being the only one from Sub-Saharan Africa that was invited. There was somebody from South Africa, somebody from the Middle East. There were 3 former European prime ministers in that group. And 7 years ago, we were cursing and quarreling that they said we'll be a failed state in 15 years. In the report that came out last year, Nigeria was just ignored as having lost relevance, strategic relevance in West Africa. Said that Nigeria doesn't matter anymore. It is not a joke. A real study has shown that because we've not done what is required to build our country, we are becoming not just of so little consequence, but people expect that we will fail anyway. So think of Africa post-Nigeria. But you know what? It can change. Yes. And there's those of us here who can make that change. Yes. And my example of how it can is of another economist who won a Nobel Prize, and that Nobel Prize in the economist called Gunnar Myrdal. Some of us remember Gunnar Myrdal's famous book, Asian Drama, in which he said that Indonesia was in a phenomenon he developed which he called intrinsic stagnation. That Indonesia was a basket case, it was hopeless, it could not possibly make progress. If you really look at the numbers, Nigeria is in intrinsic stagnation. Forget about World Bank growth figures. If you do a purchasing power parity calculation of economic growth per capita, Nigeria in the last 25 years has grown at a rate of 0.0%. It is stagnated as an economy. But you know what? When Gunnar Myrdal wrote off Indonesia in the 60s, all it took was for a group of young Indonesian economists who were going to school in Berkeley to return to their country. And one, yes, challenged but wise military ruler called also had to literally force the countries to these young economies apart. Growing apart is a comparison of Indonesia and Nigeria. As Indonesia was going north, Nigeria was going south. We can reverse it.
Amen.
It's in your hands.
Amen.
And I think that probably deserves a bit more than